The southwestern city of Jeonju in Jeollabuk-do Province is known for its traditional attractions such as the Jeonju Hanok Village, trendy spots appealing to the young people, and, of course, Jeonju bibimbap. Now, in this city, one of Korea's main film events, the annual Jeonju International Film Festival, is kicking off next week. We'll take a peek into what we can expect at this year's festival with our movie expert Jae Soh, professor and filmmaker at Seoul Institute of the Arts. Welcome back, Professor Soh.
Nice to be back.
So this year marks the 26th Jeonju International Film Festival. Now, if we have the Busan International Film Festival in autumn, we have the Jeonju International Film Festival in spring. So can you tell us a little bit about the significance of this JIFF, if we can call it JIFF as well in short, just like BIFF?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's the two seasons, it's spring and autumn. So basically, you know, when the flowers blooming and everything's bright and, you know, warm, it's a really great festival in the city of Jeonju. Of course, it's famous for its food and culture. So it's a festival that celebrates independent movies, art movies, things like that. And then there's BIFF, you know, like JIFF, like Busan, where basically it happens in autumn, in full autumn. So after a sweltering summer, you know, the first time it's kind of cool. So the two festivals have that in common, is that they're designed to sort of represent the beginning of each of the seasons of the year. And then, you know, the films are really different. BIFF is more, I would say, Asian cinema and mainstream cinema. And they have bigger stars, things like that. But I think JIFF definitely has, Jeonju has its own sort of very interesting style, because many of the independent filmmakers that have come out of there has started to make mainstream films as well.
Right. Yeah.
So today we're going to delve into JIFF, and we're going to start off with talking about the opening film. I heard that it's a film that was entirely shot by smartphones that we all use every day. What message does this send to the movie industry?
Well, the director of the movie is called Continental 25, and the director is Radu Jade, and he's a Romanian filmmaker who's already famous for a movie called Bad Luck Banging in 2021. He won the Berlin International Film Festival's Golden Bear for his film. So he's a filmmaker that's sort of really up and coming. They call him a genius. And I think he decided to choose sort of a medium like the smartphone to shoot. It's not a new thing, but I think what it captured is it's a kind of a social commentary, black comedy about basically a social worker that has to go around kicking people out of, you know, street people, just like living, you know, in places illegally. And the irony is, like, one of the people in the story that they kick out commits suicide. So I think it's kind of shot in a documentary style. You know, I looked at a lot of the trailer bits, and it really has this kind of like real raw quality to the movie. So I think it's a sort of a perfect Jeonju Film Festival sort of film to start out the year, you know, the whole festival with. So that has that. And then the closing night film is also a documentary as well. So that's a Korean film that's going to happen as well. So I think this year's, there was like a lot of entries of documentaries. So I think this crop of films this year will probably show a lot of documentaries, kind of experimental works like that. Yeah.
Well, we just saw a bit of the trailer from the movie made of the smartphone, but you really can't tell apart. I mean, just regular people like us can't really tell apart. So I guess it's more about the story, not really about whether it's shot by smartphone or by other cameras, I guess. But let's talk a little bit about the topics there at JIFF this year. Gender identity, female solidarity, and the meaning of family. Those are some of the topics that are being explored. So how do you see the trend of this year's JIFF?
It's kind of, I think right now, because we've had a political upheaval in Korea, it's still ongoing, but it's really refreshing to sort of watch movies that sort of like take it to another sort of plane of, you know, reality. So I think, you know, going to show movies about gender or LGBTQ movies, and also about sort of families, and we're not talking about traditional families, but sort of surrogate or pseudo families that sort of occur because of items. And one of the big things this year that I wanted to talk about was a film called 36-7, it's like 1670, directed by Park Joon-ho. And this is a movie about a North Korean defector that comes to South Korea, and he's gay. So all the things that he has to sort of encounter in Korean society that's very resistance, number one, against people escaping from North Korea, and number two, the fact that he's a homosexual. Also, there's a movie called Summer Camera by Song Seung-hee. And basically, it's a kind of a refreshing look at sort of like the coming of age story of people that are in their teens. And it's about a lesbian story, but the center of the story isn't really about their lesbian relationship, but how, basically in Korea as a young person, it's hard enough just growing up, and then you have identity crises because you've basically they're gender-related stories like that. And also, as you mentioned, families, not the traditional families that mother, father, that kind of thing. There's a movie called Savior of My Life by Bang Mi-ri, and this movie talks about sort of basically what it's like to be in an orphanage in Korea. It's about a young woman who basically gets out of an orphanage and all the sort of prejudices that she has to sort of like encounter in Korean society, and it's kind of an interesting movie like that. And also there's a movie by Lee Yeon-jung called Sunbi Sound, and this one is about sort of a three-generational story about women from three generations kind of living together, supporting each other. So not in the traditional sense of family, but it's basically a family that sort of forms because of convenience, and also because they're socially outcast. And a lot of times, being gay or being a woman in Korea, it's still, I would say, it's a kind of a male-oriented society. So they don't get the same opportunity as men in terms of getting a job and getting the kind of salaries that they want. Things like, although it's getting better, right? And this festival really showcases a lot of movies in those kinds of themes.
Very interesting topics that should be addressed.
Right, and we can definitely see the colors of JIFF through some of the movies that you've mentioned. Now, you did introduce some of the films, but is there any film that specifically caught your attention from this year's festival?
Well, we mentioned Continental 25, so that's a really good film. So as you said, shot on smartphone, but now smartphones are sometimes better than it used to be before. So it's like up there in the traditional level. And also, there's a documentary by Deming Chen called Always, and this one is about a Chinese boy from a very poor family that discovers poetry. So that's a really good film to watch if you get a chance. And then mentioned Park Juno's 3670 about the North Korean defector who's, is gay. And then there's a movie that I would like two sections that I want to recommend, which is one is by the actress and singer Lee Jung-yeon, who's she started with a movie called A Petal, which is kind of a movie about the Gwangju massacre. Really an excellent film, and that was her debut film, and everybody was like, who is she? And now she's an established actress that has come out in a lot of movies, and she has a retrospective of her work, and then she has a short called Going Flower Viewing, which is her own sort of debut as a director that's coming out. That's interesting. And I also want to recommend an excellent Korean director from the 80s and 90s, still alive, Bae Chang-ho. So they're doing a retrospective of his works. And there's a documentary about his movie making of Hwang Jin-hee and his life. So I would definitely recommend these kinds of movies to watch.
We'll take note of those recommendations, Professor Soh. Now, apart from the film lineup, I heard there are also very interesting programs at the film festival. Anything you want to mention?
Well, Jeonju is kind of an interesting city. I had the pleasure of being invited there, and they call it the home of sound. And basically, Jeonju has its own production facilities. It's basically government funded. Also, the city of Jeonju is really into it. So we had this project which happened a couple of years ago where they invited experts. I happened to be invited as a filmmaker. And basically, we wanted to make K sound. And the whole project behind that was to create sounds that usually when you put sound effects into a movie, you have a sound library that maybe was recorded in Hollywood and things like that. So the whole purpose of the K library the sound library was to create sounds completely originated from, Korea. So everything from nature sounds to, we were laughing, it was like baby sounds crying. You want a Korean baby crying instead of a Western baby, things like that. So, we started to do it. So now there's a huge sort of, there's going to be a big talk called the Brilliant Conversations at the festival, basically sort of showcasing this kind of K sound. And I think what's interesting about it is it's a project that I sort of also cooperate, but a lot of now filmmakers, you know, their Live Tone's a really famous sound production company that worked on movies like, you know, Parasite and also Squid Game. And they're gonna, the artists from that company is gonna come out and talk about how the future of like sound from Korea itself is now embedded into Korean content itself.
I wonder whether those K sounds also involve traditional Korean instruments like kayagum, for instance, because those create a totally different atmosphere in movies. And also, Professor Soh, do you think the variety of topics and formats and also music of films featured at JIFF will strengthen the power of K content?
Definitely. I think one of the great things about Jeonju or JIFF is the fact that it really showcases a lot of independent movies, movies that maybe a person with no money or they had a lot of projects that maybe were too controversial for a commercial sort of release of the movie. So there have been a lot of big movies that came out of there. For example, there's a movie called Our President by Lee Chang-jae. It was a documentary about the president, Nomuyon, and that became a huge hit, but it debuted at Jeonju. And they would have projects like, it's the Jeonju Cinema Project, which is basically, you would take sort of people from, that were showcased in the festival before, you would make like a short film, an omnibus movie. So it was like showing 3 different filmmakers, and this happened in 2014. So at that time, there's a filmmaker, you know, from a foreign country, Yorgi Parfi, who made a movie called Free Fall, and then Shin Yoon-sik made Avian Kid, and also Park Jun-bum made Alive, and that was, they showcased the shorts and then it went to many different festivals. So not only that, so basically Jeonju is a sort of a platform for sort of new filmmakers. I think maybe the next Bong Joon-ho could come out of there, you know, and I'm hoping that, whereas like I would say there's Busan Film Festival and Busan Film Festival. Busan's more of a genre-oriented film festival, and then Busan's sort of like Asian cinema and mainstream cinema. But those are sort of movies that kind of have more financial backing. And I would say of the 3 festivals, Jeonju's the one that is a dark horse. Like you don't really know what's going to happen. Like somebody might have made a movie with just like funds that they put together with their friends, and suddenly it's like a brilliant movie. So sort of like a discovery of new talent is definitely something that JIFF has a sort of a finger on.
Very interesting. Well, Professor Soh, that's all the time we have. Maybe because the festival starts next week and runs through May, we may talk about the highlights later on one day. But thank you very much for your insights again, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And thank you, Bella, as always. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you back next week.
Yes, I'll see you back next week.